So we covered all the goody goodness that the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s had to offer. And today we're here to relive the joy of the 2010s.
But Alex, you unfocused little fecker, isn't your channel supposed to be about video games?
Right, video games. Let's see. In previous lists, I might have forgotten one or two very mighty titles, like Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar from the 80s, Thief from the 90s, and Deus Ex from the 2000s. When I saw these games mentioned in the comment sections, I thought,
Yes, I'm a criminal. I admit it. I apologize.
Fuck me, right?
know that some of your favorite games might not make it to the list, because, well, they're too fucking overrated. Not to my liking. And because I don't want to make the same mistake again, and because we don't know if the 2010s was the last decade we saw through to the end, I might as well be as thorough as I can this time. And to that end, I'm going to cheese it, like I cheese my boss fights in From Software games. This time we're going to have not one, but two sets of mentions before the top picks. Let's call the first one, Rapid Fire Honorable Mentions, or something like that. And the second one, Revered Mentions.
You dirty fecker.
Yes, but dirty fecker or not, even I have rules. First, no stacking. Yes, I know that it was a bit of a trend to break up stories into multiple games in the 2010s, but we'll just have to go with the best of the lot for those cases. Second, my release date, my platform of choice. Remember, as anxiety-inducing as it might sound, the 2010s are already over, and some recent very awesome games won't be making the list. Third, if a game needs fan-made mods to be considered great, it doesn't count, in my estimation. Fourth, this is a personal list, and if you don't like it, well...
Sorry to disappoint you boys.
But I'm sure your favorites will get a mention here. So as promised, let's start with those rapid-fire honorable mentions. NBA 2K16, the last sports game that didn't suck, and that's because it had a little bit of role-playing in it. Hitman 2, everything that's ever been good about Hitman rolled into a game. Almost everything. Deus Ex, Human Revolution, an action game with RPG elements and a decent story. Where do I sign? Dishonored. Let me tell you about this time I was put in the driver's seat of this most stylish and amazing ride. Shadows Awakening. I knew it. I knew there were awesome isometric action RPGs that didn't try to copycat Diablo 2, and this might just be the best of them. Mountain Blade. With mods, this surely is in the top 3 for this decade. Without mods, this game ranks slightly below World of Warcraft in terms of ridiculous amounts of times put into it. Let's talk about our revered mentions now. Grim Dawn. The developers of this action RPG were smart enough to put a finger on everything that really turned Diablo 2 into the greatest RPG of all time. They took note of everything Titan Quest did right to improve upon the formula, partially because some of them were also part of that team. They also added quite a few new elements to make it even better. This time you have story-based decisions. The story itself is much more interesting. There's an open world for you to navigate, filled with hidden areas and secrets. There are altars for you to cleanse, there's a constellation system that allows you to further customize your character, and many other goody things that'll keep you coming back for more. By the way, this is a game I go back to every January, so that's what I'm going to do next. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. I would have felt dirty if I had not included at least one of them nut-grinding jewels from Software on this list. They are not exactly up my alley, let's say, but I do think that every game they've made has been better than the previous one. Well, mostly. And that's why From Software eventually made Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, a game that tells the story that we can actually follow, and not one that we have to piece together and interpret from codex entries. A game that allows you to tackle again its toughest challenges every time you fail, without having to spend minutes getting back to where you last died. A game that overall offers the best real-time combat design that I have ever experienced. Not only is Sekiro's combat second to none, but it also has multiple endings and you have to put some creativity and eavesdropping into figuring out how to get the best of them. And getting the best of them is totally worth the hassle. Yes, this one deserves a bad motherfucker seal of approval. Underrail. I've mentioned this obscure indie game from the year 2015 many times already, and I probably will continue to do so. For me, this is the real spiritual successor to the original Fallout games. It doesn't exactly share all of its vibes, or its exact same theme, It goes its own way to deliver its own experience, but it absolutely scratches that old itch from the late 90s. Underrail is hard, really hard. So much so, in fact, that even seasoned CRPG veterans recommend that you play it on easy mode, but don't do that to yourself. What's great about Underrail is that you have to dive deep into its character building mechanics, its crafting, its trading, and everything else it has to offer to stand a chance. It also has a surprisingly immersive story that blends together a little bit of X-Files, a little bit of Blade Runner, and some good old-fashioned Falloutness. It also comes packed with some of the best dark meta humor and some of the cleverest references from other media that I've ever seen in a game. Yes, its production values aren't great, and its initial moments are boring, but do yourself a favor and do try to endure all of this, because what lies beyond is one of the best games there is in the CRPG ballpark. Shadowrun Hong Kong, a criminally underrated RPG in a criminally underrated saga. This is the real cyberpunk jewel. The story in Shadowrun Hong Kong is a manual on how to write good stories for video games. Those stakes, those plot points, those characters with relatable motivations, those NPCs that walk a veritable path of shades of grey, and that lore, futuristic cyberpunk that has dwarves, elves, orcs, and trolls in it. Where do I sign up, sir? BioShock Infinite, yet another game that thrives on its great story and lore. This is a shooter of all things. BioShock Infinite has linear gameplay, but that's about the only thing that's linear about it. Unfortunately, I really can't tell you much about what makes this game one of the best of the decade without treading upon spoiler territory. I'll just say this: if you're a story guy, you have to get this one. Do you understand? This title's lore is also one of the most delightfully intricate and immersive I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Maybe the most intricate and immersive? The voice acting is up to par with the best films and TV shows, and the gameplay is lean and always entertaining, even if it's a little bit on the easy side. This was on and off my top 10 list, and I totally understand why some people say it's their favorite. So here it is, my top 10 list for the 2010s. Outward, 2019. I hate it when people talk about games and say stuff like, if you don't think this game is great, it's because you don't understand it. But since I have absolutely no problems with double standards, I will say this about Outward. This game is everything, well, almost everything Skyrim should have been before its modding community came to the rescue with all the many amazing mods that brought all the immersion the game lacked out of the box. The feeling of adventure in this game is quite simply incomparable. Outward is the embodiment of I did it my way. It has 3 main quests that are mutually exclusive, but there's also so much that can transpire in so many different ways in all respects. All of its secondary mechanics are impeccable. The level design of its dungeons is brilliant, the immersion factor is off the roof, the music is phenomenal, and it also has a very large overarching message for you, and it's brilliantly woven into the gameplay itself. Batman Arkham City, 2013.
But Alex, Spider-Man for the PlayStation!
Batman Arkham City was the pinnacle for this series, and that is saying something. Arkham City had more of everything that made Arkham Asylum great, none of what was bad, and also added an open world for you to do some proper open world Batman-y stuff. I could spend hours just floating about Arkham City, just making the most out of those wonderful flying mechanics, while unbridled crime went on somewhere down there. Also, if you're a Batman fan, this is a love letter to you. Video games are beating the crap out of films, let me tell you. And this one gets a bad motherfucker seal of approval. Divinity Original Sin II, 2017. It really takes a hardened, blind hardcore fan of some other RPGs of old not to see that the combat in Divinity Original Sin 2 is absolutely phenomenal. Come on, trial and error to see which spell or skill works against a certain enemy? That shit takes time, not tactical skills or intellect. Just look that shit up on the internet and you're done. In Divinity Original Sin 2, there's the level layout, enemy talents, and lots of other things to consider for every encounter, and that just beats the crap out of every other turn-based RPG that has ever existed. But it's just not the combat that's great in Divinity Original Sin 2. Its character creation and progression system is brilliant, its art is immersive and technically accomplished, its story is solid, and your companions are awesome. Yes, they are good companions. They have proper motivations, obstacles, and antagonists, even if they may not have the best dialogue lines. Divinity Original Sin 2 is not perfect, but it could have actually landed one of the top 3 spots on this list if it weren't for the many easy-to-get-right things that they got totally wrong. In spite of that, it totally deserves a place on this list. Pillars of Eternity 2, 2018. Pillars of Eternity 2 might not be as spectacular as Divinity Original Sin 2 when it comes to its combat or its character creation system, but it nails that one thing us RPG lovers hunger for in all our games, and that is the experience of being in the driver's seat. True, some games of old did this better, but Pillars of Eternity 2 gets it right where it counts. For example, you got to get rid of this mofo, so if you take the time to talk to people, you might know that he likes to roll it Elton John style when it's happy hour at the local tavern. So you might want to consider making your contribution for things to get animated at the bar, and then sabotage his piano so that when he comes down to play, he takes himself out. You know, Hitman style. Or you may let some dudes steal his ship and wait for him to come out to an observation point and ambush the bastard there and then. There's also bigger stuff that you start working your way towards early on in the game, like ingratiating yourself with the faction you want to side with, or the faction within the faction that you want to favor. Pillars 2 is rather easy, but there have been more than enough DLCs and patches to sate your tactical combat thirst, like those mega bosses, all of which are awesome in the highest difficulty level, and the Slayer Seeker Survivor DLC. There are a couple of things that the first Pillars of Eternity did a little better, but because there's a no stacking rule, the sequel wins by a nose. Disco Elysium, 2019. The spiritual successor of Torment not only gets those philosophical points across in a leaner and more efficient way, but it does so in a way that feels closer and more relatable. It is of course not as robust as its source inspiration, and it doesn't weave this beefy D&D lore into the story, but it holds its own weight gracefully. If Pillars of Eternity 2 succeeded at putting you in the driver's seat of its story, Disco Elysium also made you feel like it's your story. The opportunity cost of life is brilliantly depicted in this title, and it comes packed with all the fun, the drama, and the joy we get from it in real life. Disco Elysium is a life-changing experience. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, 2011. Yes, I know they charged $50 for 12 new characters, and an X-Spectator mode when it first came out. Yes, I know many of your favorite modes were missing. Yes, I know it was a corporate cash grab, but it was a corporate cash grab that made me sink more than 200 hours into it. So just sip it. This one-on-one fighting game has everything that was great about the Street Fighter 2 formula in freaking steroids. And yes, I do think it's better than Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Being able to build your little roster with 3 fighters adds an epic tactical layer to the whole one-on-one combat deal that was just not there before. This is the kind of over-the-top cheese that you just can't get enough of. You get to choose from 50 heroes, and those include your favorites from Devil May Cry, Street Fighter, Resident Evil, Final Fight, your favorite Avengers, your favorite X-Men, and they are all spot-on incarnations of the original characters. Yes, this feels exactly how Doctor Strange, or Wolverine, or Ghost Rider would approach the fight. Also, the Heroes and Heralds mode introduces a brilliant collectible card-based party enhancement mechanic that makes the game infinitely addictive. Not only am I not going to stop playing this fucker until I get all the cards, but also the tactical dimension that this card system adds to your 3-guy or gal little fighting party constitute the absolute pinnacle of character enhancement in a fighting game for me. Thronebreaker, 2018. Listen guys, you're all awesome, and I love you. You deserve a bad motherfucker seal of approval. But what the fuck is the matter with you all? Why is this game not a million% more popular with you? Did you guys not like Gwent? Do you guys not love the Witcher universe? This card-based RPG, because that's what it is, in case you didn't know, is a near perfect game. Exploration, deck building, combat and decision making are brilliantly put together in this game. Every aspect of Thronebreaker's gameplay has a significant impact on the other to the point that every little thing you decide while traversing the map, improving your camp, talking to your companions or to other NPCs will feel like a game-changing experience. This game has phenomenal replay value, it tells a great story, and it features 10 out of 10 voice acting. If you have played the Witcher series and read the books, you'll see that Thronebreaker fills in a gap about the war with Nilfgaard, one that you needed to know about. Queen Maeve's efforts against Nilfgaard are mentioned in The Lady of the Lake, but her story isn't really expanded upon. And that made sense, of course, since the story in The Lady of the Lake revolves mostly around Ciri and Geralt, and it would have been much too convoluted to get into the subplot. And while I think this was a good decision by Andrzej Sapkowski, I also think that Thronebreaker was the perfect way to expand upon Queen Maeve's story. In fact, there are story bits in The Lady of the Lake, like that meeting between monarchs and the Nilfgaardian envoy after the war with Nilfgaard, that will be much more interesting if you've played Thronebreaker by the time you read this part. Yes, combat is a little too easy, I know, even in the hardest difficulty, but who the hell cares when the game is this awesome? Fallout New Vegas, 2010. The combat in Fallout New Vegas isn't great. It's definitely not balanced, and its secondary mechanics are
Hot garbage!
fuck you big time crafting in Fallout New Vegas. But if being in the driver's seat is your thing, then say no more and get this mofo. You are in the driver's seat when it comes to the most operative part of the gameplay. You are in the driver's seat when it comes to navigating the world and doing its quest. You are in the driver's seat when it comes to deciding whose side you're going to be on, if you even decide to be on someone's side. I must admit I was ready to label it an overrated piece of junk before I got to New Vegas, but when I got to the game's main city, I realized the fates of everyone in New Vegas were in my hands, and that feeling was just epic. Many games use a succession of stills at the end of the game to tell the story of what became of the world, its people, your friends, and even yourself after your epic adventure. Arcanum, Dragon Age, and Pillars of Eternity 2 stand out as some of the most satisfying games in this regard. They truly make you feel like you played a part, a very important part in shaping the future of the world, but they all pale next to Fallout New Vegas in this aspect, and that's what makes Fallout New Vegas timeless. Mass Effect 2, 2010. So 404 had this to say for the last list. When you got to your first, and I still didn't hear a word about a certain sequel, I disliked it furiously. And only then, just to be sure, check the release date. Yeah, sorry about that, it was January 2010. My friend, you have nothing to fear but fear itself. Just like you will find a way out of your latest predicament, Commander Shepard & Co. also found a way to make it to the podium of this list. While the whole is definitely greater than the sum of the parts with this saga, some of the parts are better than others, and Mass Effect 2 takes the cake here as the best bit of the story. I still think that Mass Effect 3 has the two best moments in the entire saga, but it fucks up things in the end enough for me not to choose it over the second game in the series. Actually, if it were not for this completely imbecilic mechanic, it would absolutely get a bad motherfucker seal of approval. Hell, it might have even gotten the top spot if it had not been for this. Listen, I understand the joy that's in the freedom of doing whatever you wish, however you wish, and I am constantly fishing for games that let you do things your way. But for me, games are another form of storytelling, like books and movies. In my book, a good story-based game is one in which you have a say in how the story goes. And well, giving you complete freedom over who to kill and what to do, however fun that might be, cannot be done without one of these two things happening. A. Nothing that you do in the exercise of that freedom will affect the outcome of the story in any significant way. Or B. You have all this freedom because there isn't really a story, but a collection of missions loosely tied together, as it happens in Mountain Blade for example. The bottom line here is that complete freedom in every aspect of the game is simply a no-go in games that seek to deliver a cinematic story-driven experience. How many dialogue lines have to be written in anticipation of those actions you perform while exercising your freedom? How many animations and cutscenes? Let's say you kill this vendor in Mass Effect 2 to steal his stuff because, freedom. And then what? You killed the entire Citadel. How does the story continue if you do so? Does the Council still talk to you as though nothing had happened? What about Anderson and Udina? How immersion-breaking would it be if you simply paid some fine to restore things to the way they were? And what about your companions? Would they be okay with you killing that vendor? And the Elusive Man? Would he not give two shits about what you did? And if he does, do we pay Martin Sheen, no less, and all the other actors to record a million lines of dialogue just in case you decide to kill this vendor in the Citadel? Or Miranda, because she's fucking annoying or whatever? What would happen to the story if you could, let's say, become a space pirate? Expecting Arcanum levels of freedom in high production value games with cinematic narratives is unrealistic. I mean, you can prefer freedom over cinematic narratives as a concept, but that's a different story. I guess the whole point of this dissertation is that games like Jade Empire, the first Dragon Age, and the entire Mass Effect saga offer the highest achievable balance between story-structured cinematic experiences and player choice. And as far as the Mass Effect saga goes, Mass Effect 2 is the most solid entry. Its story is exciting and filled with stakes and turns of events. Some characters may be terrible, but some others are fucking timeless. And while many role-playing elements were thrown out the window in favor of less interesting action game-like mechanics, the gameplay is still fun and challenging. Mass Effect 2 also has one of my favorite initial and final stretches in any game, so expect to see this title popping up if I ever make a list on those. With all its admittedly many flaws, this game deserves a place in the podium. The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, 2015. Listen friends, are you listening? Okay, do this. For this 2022, take 2 months. That's all I'm asking. Forget about watching movies, TV shows, reading other books, playing other games. Do yourself a favor and read The Last Wish, Sword of Destiny, Blood of Elves, Time of Contempt, Baptism of Fire, The Tower of the Swallow, and The Lady of the Lake. Just imagine that, instead of me, it's little old Anna that's asking you to read.
Would you read to me? It'll make you feel better.
And then play The Witcher, The Witcher 2, The Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt, The Witcher 3 Heart of Stone expansion, The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine expansion, and Thronebreaker. Do this, and you'll be treating yourself to the most fascinating, entertaining, original, and exciting universe of medieval fantasy out there. It is truly mind-blowing. Not all the books are great, especially the first ones. Not everything about the games is good, but the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts. What's great about reading the books and playing the games is that, though there is some overlapping content between the books and the games, both series complement and add context to each other masterfully. Do you feel like you came late to the party every time characters like Yarp and Sigrin and Margarita Louis the Antille pop up in the Witcher games, kind of out of nowhere? And it turns out that the character that you are meant to play seems to know these people, and it turns out that he has a history with them. Well, the books have got you covered. How is it that you know the druid Mousak? Or Kragon Crate for that matter? That came out of nowhere. Yennefer is an asshole. Why is Geralt obsessed with getting back to her? Well, the book's got you covered. Damn, I wish Geralt had gotten better acquainted with Fringilla Vigo. Well, the books have got you covered. On the other hand, if you've read the books and you've wondered what happened with Dandelion and Toussaint while Geralt and his company set out to Vilgefort's fortress, well, the games have got you covered. Or, damn, this vampire Regis is kinda glossed over. I wish they had told me a little bit more about him. Well, the games have got you covered. Or, I really don't get what the deal is with Philippa and Dijkstra.
Way back when, did you really send assassins after Dijkstra?
You believe I do not remember we were once lovers?
Maybe it's just me, but I think you'd consider that in itself to be reason enough. Actually, I've long wondered why you parted, quarreled even.
You see, Geralt, there are those who keep politics separate from their private lives, and those who do not.
Which one was Dijkstra?
The more boring of the two.
Well, the games have got you covered. The Witcher universe is larger than life, and both the books and the games raise just enough questions about the universe that it becomes intriguing and satisfying to engage in the other part of it, be it the books or the games, but not enough to drown you in what the fuckitness. Although I have to admit there might be just a little bit of what the fuckitness in The Witcher 2 if you don't play at least twice and choose the Roach and the Yorveth path each time. Listen, The Witcher 3 does fuck up a couple of things, I know. Read The Tower of the Swallow and The Lady of the Lake and you'll see why. But what it adds to the lore of the universe is priceless. There are new characters and stories like the Bloody Barons, which are 100% consistent with the Witcher lore, side quests that are so deep, so immersive, so mind-blowingly creative that they dwarf most main quests and stories in most other games. Its peoples and factions, their conflicts and histories are unrivaled in the world of video games. Its graphics still look incredible today, and its gameplay is crazy fun. Even the shitty secondary gameplay aspects like boxing get elevated due to the quality of the writing and the feeling of adventure. It has, hands down, the best minigame there's ever been in any video game. It's like playing freaking Magic the Gathering inside The Witcher. And with Mask of the Betrayer's permission, it might also have the best expansion pack that has ever been made. And if you consider how well it complements and adds to the events of the Lady of the Lake, then it doesn't even need Mask of the Betrayer's permission. Yes, D&D freaks, I know there's a lot that Mask of the Betrayer adds to D&D lore, just leave me be with my fandom. To me, there's no question that this is the game of the decade. And you know what else there is no question about? The fact that you guys are the best community out there, and hearing your suggestions, comments, and even rants is always a pleasure. Thank you for tuning in for this series of videos. Let me know about your favorites, and if everything turns out well, I'll be seeing you for the top 10 of the 2020s. Never stop gaming, but don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.